Hi there and welcome to the Regional Childcare Development Fund Phase 1 Module 3 Part C, Defining Expected Behaviours, specifically defining routines. It's very important that you've done Part A, defining our big picture expectations, and Part B, defining specific behaviours using UMPAR language before you come to Part C. So if you haven't done those, go back and do those two first, and then you can come and do routines. But if you've got your expectations and you've got a behaviour matrix, then let's jump into making procedures and routines. So we're in the phase 1 modules, which is focused on things that we do that support all children to be successful. Defining expected behaviours is so incredibly important that we broke it into 3 sections. Our big picture expectations of how we want kids to be, and how we want to raise successful citizens, our specific behaviours that cause kids to be more successful at meeting those big picture expectations, and now we're into procedures and routines. These can make a really big difference. So every service needs these 3 things to implement positive behaviour support. How do we want our kids to be? How do they be successful at being those kind of people? And then routines for daily activities that children can develop independence with. So procedures become routines when we teach them and practice them enough times. They are specific expectations either for a specific place or for a particular time in the day that have a step-by-step structure. So you do the first bit, then you do the second bit, then you do the third bit, and that's how you get it right. If we can teach kids a little bit of independence with these, it's going to make them achieve a lot more behavioural success, and it's going to allow us to have really positive interactions with kids of being able to praise them up for that success. So where does the practice of having routines and procedures fit with the early years learning framework? It fits in outcome 1, kids having a strong sense of identity. Kids feel safe, secure and supported when they know what's coming up in their day and what things will happen in the day. So if you're making a poster with the routines, and particularly if you're teaching a routine, like teaching a start of the day routine or teaching a transition routine, you can feel confident that it helps to meet outcome 1.1. Kids feeling safe at childcare or preschool is knowing what will happen in their day and being successful with a routine. So this is an example of a routine and a procedure. I can only dream of having dogs that are this successful with a bathroom routine. I don't know how they managed to get that photo taken, but it's pretty impressive. But it shows why we have procedures and why we develop them into routines, because it helps us get along in society. That's why we have transition procedures. It's why we have entrance procedures. It helps us all operate in a society with lots of people in a manner that's still orderly and still efficient. So procedures and routines help us to get along in life ourselves, but help us to get along with others in group environments. So procedures are the steps we take to complete a task, and spelling out our procedures helps create a vision of a successful child. A procedure is the step-by-step how to get it right, the step-by-step how to do it successfully in our setting. We want to define the criteria for success and then teach kids how to do it. So procedures are really important for being able to do that. Procedures become routines if we teach them and reinforce them. Routines develop if we're consistent in our use of procedures. The goal of us teaching and teaching and teaching and reinforcing is for kids to learn a little bit of independence with following routines. Great for their developing sense of self, and great for us organising our classroom so that we can interact positively with the kids is when they learn to follow some routines with a degree of independence depending on their age. So procedures become routines when we teach them. Visual schedules for routines are strongly recommended. We have little bits of our brain that are dedicated to processing information that we hear verbally, to processing language, but we have a really big bit of our brain at the back of our head that is dedicated to processing visual information. So we have more brain to be able to process things that we see than things that we hear. So that's why we recommend having our routines presented visually, because it just makes it easier for kids to be successful with doing it. We like to have visual schedules for routines for all children, but then we might need to provide individualized routines for those kids who need a bit more support. So this is an example of a whole class visual schedule, and you can see that the child is being taught to refer to the whole class visual schedule for that question of what's coming up next. They work really well with photographs, and photographs make kids much more likely to engage with a visual schedule. When it comes to behaviour expectations, pictures, even hand-drawn pictures with stick figures, are totally fine. Because they're really for the adults, the behaviour expectations. But because we want kids to be engaging with our procedures and routines, photos are really recommended, because kids are more likely to go over and have a look at photos when they can see themselves or their friends in them. So we do recommend, if you can, to photograph your visual, to use photographs in developing your visual schedule. That said, this is an individual schedule, and this one has picture examples. So there might be a whole class visual schedule, and then this is the one that is on the desk for this particular child. You can see that they've organised it with the Velcro so that they're not presenting too many things at once. So they can just show a couple of things at a time or one thing at a time, which can really help children that feel a bit overwhelmed to be more successful when we restrict how much we overwhelm them with at one time. So we can have whole class visual schedules, but also additional detail for kids that need more support to be successful. So we'd like to start thinking about the different tasks that we do, and either tasks or transitions often have a lot more steps than we think that they do. We're used to performing them as one item because we've practiced them many times, but for little kids who are learning them for the first time, they actually contain more items than their working memory can hold. So we're going to have a look at a few examples. Hand washing is an example of something that we've learnt to do as adults as one chunk, because we've practiced the steps and getting them in the right order so many times that now we remember it as one thing. But little children who are learning that behaviour for the first time, there might be some kids that do really great hand washing at home, and there are some kids that come to us who don't do really great hand washing at home. We can level the playing field. We can make it more fair so that all those kids can be successful if we teach all of our children the same procedure, the same steps in the same order, and if we provide them with some visual supports that once we've taught them a bunch of times, that can help remind them of how to be successful. So hand washing, 8 steps, it's actually quite a lot going on in hand washing. That's more than a little person's working memory can remember. So we can either verbally prompt them, or we can help by referring them to this visual routine prompt. Even a simple task like finishing your work actually has quite a lot of steps in it. So for this one, they've broken down the steps of the work completion task, which is rule up, do the writing, glue it, and staple it. 4 steps there. Made it a lot easier for this kid to be successful by not having to tell them 50 times, but by giving them the steps in the order and then the visual cue of what they need to do to complete that. Things that we know well, like fire drills, can actually be quite anxiety-provoking for some children. So we can prevent that anxiety and make kids feel more supported, and also reduce the likelihood of an escalation if we teach them the procedure that we're going to follow when we do those kind of things. So this is a really nice example. They've got the words for the things that we'll do, and then they've got a visual image to help the kids. So kids that can't read can still kind of read the sequence of pictures. We've got the words for the adults, we've got the pictures for the kids. This is the kind of thing we're going to be developing, maybe for a fire drill or maybe for another type of routine. So now's the time I'd like you to pull out your handout. There should be a page, the back page of your handout should be dedicated to a procedure planning sheet. And the handout has 3 columns. One is for the steps, so the number of the steps, so number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, going down the side. Then there's a section for you to draw a picture cue. Now, if you're a great drawer, that's awesome. But if you just want to draw a stick figure to remind you to take a photo of a child performing that step, that's absolutely fine. And then on the far column is for you to write the words, the actions that the kids need to take. So if your action is squirt soap on your hands, then you would write squirt soap on your hands in that section there. The procedure that I want you to focus on, I've given the example of entry into your classroom because it's often a procedure that needs a lot of support, but you can do any procedure you like. You can do hand washing if you want to. You can do the transition from afternoon tea time to outside time if you want to. You can do the sign in and come into your classroom procedure. You can do any procedure that you want. I want you to reflect on what's something that you get kids to do a lot, that it would make it so much easier if they could learn just a tiny bit of independence, if they could be prompted to use a poster to remind themselves what steps were next. Any procedure that you like. If you don't know what to do, just do the entry into your room as an example. But I want you to choose one procedure and I want you to draft a procedure poster. So work out what are the different steps that you need kids to do. How could you do a picture prompt for the kids to look at? And how could you do the words so that any adults that come into your room know what are the steps that kids need to do in order to be successful at that procedure? So it helps the kids, but it also helps any new adults know how do you want things done in your room. So press pause on this presentation now and everybody work on this step of drafting a procedure poster. Okay, so you should have done a draft version of your procedure poster. And I wanted to highlight that this is really helpful for us in our services, but gee, it can be helpful for families. The time between being in bed and getting yourself to the service or school actually has a whole lot of steps in it, and it can be pretty stressful for families that are trying to get multiple adults and multiple kids out the door and on time. So helping families to create a getting ready for school visual can be one way that we support families with increasing the predictability and decreasing the stress of the morning routine. I wanted to highlight to you this website, pricelessparenting.com charts for kids. It has free downloadable PDFs of a number of different routines. They include morning routines and bedtime routines. You don't have to use them exactly as they are, but if you want something that you can just hit print on and have ready to give to your parents to share with them the work that you're doing in positive behaviour support, it's one resource that you can use if you would like to. All right, thank you so much.